If you're like me, I think you'll relate to this one really well. I can't for the life of me imagine, what life today would be like without the Grabs, the Gojeks, or the WeChats of the world. So today, to discuss how the emergence of super apps is reshaping the rules, we've got a special guest and my very big boss, Mr. Mohd Khairil Abdullah, CEO of Axiata Digital and Boost, one of Malaysia's leading e-wallets. And moderating the discussion will be ADA's Adrian Burton, who heads special projects for us. Over to you guys.
All right, thanks, Steph. Hi guys, welcome to ReCon 2.0, hosted by ADA. My guest today, I think Steph just done a fantastic introduction, Mr. Khairil Abdullah. Welcome, MK.
How are you, AB? Can you guys hear me? Can you guys see me?
Yeah, got you loud and clear, sitting on a beach somewhere, buddy, looking fantastic.
I heard Bahamas. I heard Bahamas at the start, so I had to have that kind of inspiration.
Love it. MK, so the audience at home, they'll hear a lot of abbreviations. You'll hear AB and MK. I think that's just the relationship. So there's no code or anything like that. But MK, today we're sort of going to touch on the emergence of super apps in a digital-first future. I've been very fortunate to sit a front row to the, I guess, the birth of Malaysia's very own super app in terms of Boost, and I've been a small part of seeing the rise and the success of Boost right now. So MK, today, what I'd like the audience to sort of walk away with is, to really sort of get a good understanding on the application and how they potentially can use these super apps to their advantage. So if you're ready, let's jump into it.
Sure.
So guys, just for the audience right now, what is a super app? There's a lot of things out there, super apps, super platforms, OTTs. Effectively, the super app must have two or more of these concepts: social media, games integration, content integration, logistics, messaging, commerce, e-wallet. Now, some of these apps that we partake with every day are lucky enough to have covered off potentially all of these, but obviously you can't cover off too much of them. So to set the context, guys, when we talk about super app, we talk about these applications that have two or more of these particular concepts. So with that, MK, we'll jump in. So just for the sake, guys, this is a fireside chat, and a couple of questions for MK to elaborate on. So the first one, MK, what's the best way for big traditional businesses to leverage on existing assets for success in a digital-first world?
Great question, AB. But kind of my retort will be: are big traditional companies even looking at leveraging their existing assets to succeed in the digital world? Yeah, what I find way too often is traditional companies, they sort of undertake a digital transformation, if you like, largely by looking at internal processes to see what can be digitized. The customer experience process, expense filings, procurement. The more progressive ones, and some of those that are working with ADA, they're actually looking at incorporating a digital go-to-market, online commerce, putting their products and services on a super app, app-based marketplaces for sure. Rarely do you find companies, though, that are actually leveraging existing assets to turn them into potentially new sources of value. So maybe the quick answer to your question is, sell your company to a PE fund that specializes in finding hidden assets and turning them into new sources of value. Then I know I'm half joking, but the truth is the track record of traditional businesses trying to do this is downright abysmal. The ones that have shown some traction, again, not success, but some traction, are companies that, to some extent, created a separate unit, they funded it appropriately, they gave it sufficient autonomy and flexibility, maybe provided them with the access to those assets, and also kind of provided the courage to sort of see it through. I'll come on to that in a short while. And then to a certain extent, get the hell out of the way, right? And let these kind of separate entities flourish. So maybe this is a lead-in for sort of how we at Axiata Digital did it, right? And yes, we are a separate company. Yes, we do have a high degree of autonomy. Yes, we have access to some of the assets that the telco has had. But I think one of the reasons why we've succeeded so far is that actually the board of Axiata Management had the courage to see it through. What I mean by that is when the losses are mounting, boards and management of these traditional companies must be able to hold their ground and defend their journey against shareholders, against investors that are demanding to cut the losses, right? Easier said than done, but this is something that I would credit the board of Axiata Group for doing so.
Fantastic, beautiful, and I think it's I love the point there, MK, about getting the hell out of the way, because I think that really sort of emphasis on that, as I've seen digital transformation come to the forefront and done digital transformation both in emerging markets and also first world markets, is the ability to want to get in and to be a part of the journey. But what they're actually doing is they're hindering the journey, and they're they're pulling it back a little bit to where it needs to be. So yeah, couldn't agree any more on that one. Interesting. Next question, MK. How would one use data to prepare your business for a digital first world? Now, this is a pretty open-ended question.
Yeah.
So well, I'll hand that over to you.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, I think this is such a key component for any company that's sort of thinking of succeeding in a digital first world, right? Again, I'll go back to kind of traditional companies a little bit, right? So all too often companies pursue their digital journey, they launch an app, right? Oh, check, right? Like I said before, they take an offline process, a desktop process perhaps, and turn it into a mobile app process, right? And they're essentially looking for ways to reduce the costs, because offline processes are generally more expensive than online processes. That's actually a very necessary thing to do. They want to find ways to acquire, to engage, to retain customers, i.e. to grow revenues. And again, that's very, very true. But all too often, data is an afterthought. For digital first companies, though, acquiring, accumulating, and analyzing the data is part of the blueprint, literally from day one. I mean, this is kind of what we live and breathe with, right, from day one. I'm sure everyone's heard the phrase, what is it? Data is the new oil. This phrase, by the way, was coined more than 10 years ago, and it's kind of cliche, but it's absolutely true, right? And just like oil, it's sitting underneath the surface doing absolutely bugger all. I'm speaking to an Aussie. I got to throw in one or two of these words. But sometimes it might actually be worth a lot more than what's on top of the surface, right? For companies who are thinking about doing this, maybe this is a rough and ready and a really high level checklist, perhaps. So one is, are you using it to find, to target, to acquire segments of users that you would like to have as customers, right? That you absolutely need to do with your data. B, perhaps, are you using it to, again, similar, find, target, and retain potential churners, right? Perhaps here's a plug for ADA, AB. I think when you were working with some of the companies that you mentioned before, a lot of Axiata digital companies sort of use ADA as their, if you like, their data consultant, right? And one example that I want to say here is that when we use ADA, we saw our acquisition costs go down by almost 75% just by kind of crunching that data that actually we're already sitting on, right? The oil that was sitting underneath the surface. But what's even more exciting was the fact that the average spend or the average revenue generation of these new cohorts that were sort of data mined were 11 times higher than the previous cohorts, right? So if you're not using your data to at least find and acquire those customers, the right set of customers, or find and target those potential churners, then you're actually sort of leaving a lot of money on the table. Now, there's a third item on my checklist, which is essentially whether you can use that data to create new sources of value, right? To potentially help other businesses acquire and retain customers, to potentially use that data for other decisioning processes, right? Selling the data, in fact, right? So again, a very rough and ready, simple checklist. But if you're not at least doing it for, A and B, or for what I said before, then you are definitely leaving money on the table.
Absolutely. And I think, MK, the biggest thing, as I said, it's such an open-ended question. We don't have enough time to, discover all the possibilities of this. But the one point that I took away from right now, from your point of view on this, is to be clear with what the outcome you want from your data. I think that a lot of businesses, and I think that, as I said at the start of it, we've obviously done a fair amount of work in this space as ADA, and also too with Axiata based companies, is that we were clear with what we wanted. And we started on an acquisition journey. And then from that acquisition journey, we went on a use case journey. From that use case journey, we now can potentially move to monetization.
Correct.
The biggest view that we had is we were clear with what we wanted to achieve. Yeah. Maybe we not know how we were going to do it, but we knew what path to take, right? We knew our North Star. So that's, as I said, I once again couldn't agree any more to be clear with what your purpose is for this particular set.
Correct. Yes. Okay. Yeah, great.
Number 3, buddy, what's the best way for big traditional businesses to better leverage on partnerships with digital natives? And this is a really, really good question, because linking it back to super apps, it's, as I said, my experience with super apps or OTTs was very nascent in a sense, until, I sort of was lucky enough to join the Axiata family, and my knowledge has obviously exponentially gone up. But not too many people on the call will know now how to really sort of leverage this in a way that can drive their business forward. So I'm interested in your views on this, buddy.
I'm starting to wonder why you're asking me a lot of questions about traditional. Is that because I've got a lot of gray around me? Right?
Nah, not at all. Okay. I think definitely the position with traditional businesses now is that we all have dreams and aspirations to go digital, but the actual stark reality is we're not there yet, and we're not there in our thinking, we're not there in our preparation, we may be not there in our customer journey or our business journey of where we need to go. So I think a lot of people can relate to this particular point.
Yeah, I think you touched on it, right? I mean, it's a lot to do with mindset. It's a lot to do with culture as opposed to sort of anything else. I mean, we discussed a little bit before on sort of legacy assets and whatnot. But look, I would say that the situation now compared to how it was sort of 5 years ago is drastically different, right? 5 years ago, I would have likened it to maybe kind of like the early explorers traveling to different civilizations. Marco Polo spoke Italian, the Yuan dynasty officials spoke Chinese, right? It was very, very different. Digital natives and big companies back then were really different, speaking different languages. Their DNAs were completely different, right? There was very little common understanding. Digital natives would use words like IoT, AI, ML, UI, UX, words like cloud, customer journeys, scrums, which for the most parts, most traditional companies didn't know about, right? It's actually a lot better today, right? I think for many reasons. One is that actually there've been a multitude of, business school case studies, business books, talks like these, to really kind of give a chance to traditional companies to learn a little bit the language and the understanding of the digital natives, right? 1. 2 is that perhaps, a lot of the organizations themselves have gone through the cultural transformation. I think you're familiar that actually the Axiata Group companies went through what's called, I think they call it MAD, M-A-D, mobile analytics. MAD, what does it stand for? Mobile analytics and digital. I think that was the transformation that kind of went through. And to a certain extent, it was kind of to narrow that gap, right? The cultural transformation was meant to narrow that gap in terms of understanding between the two. I would say that some organizations I've seen started taking a little bit of a risk, right? Where they hired people who were a little bit more digital natives rather than the traditional mindset folks in order to do that, right? So today, I think we're more like, I don't know, speaking Flemish and Dutch as opposed to German and French. Not quite Aussie and English yet. We're getting there, buddy. Not quite there yet. But the other thing to point out, though, is that I think the digital natives themselves have actually also are starting to equip themselves to how to work with traditional companies, right? Because they actually do see themselves as needing to work very closely to collaborate with these traditional companies to kind of get to a certain level of success, right? So I think at Boost, we do have a partnership team that lives, that breathes, that thinks about the traditional partners, but with a digital mindset, right? So these digital natives, especially the ones that have scaled up, are really focusing on the hiring. So if there is some guidance I would to provide, I would say, look to potentially start your journey by looking to use intermediaries. I'm sure ADA can help. If you're trying to connect, if you're a traditional company and you're trying to connect between your operations with, say, one of the super apps or the e-commerce companies, I'm sure intermediaries like ADA can help. Number 2, I would think about undertaking your own version of education, awareness, and cultural transformation, you want to call it that. Number 3, look to hire digital companies. The 4th one, which, because you said big traditional companies, then I would say exercise some humility, right? Because way too often when tiny, small digital natives go in front of a large traditional company, there's too much chest thumping and ego, and we never get anywhere with the collaboration.
Sure. MK, I couldn't agree anymore. And I think, as I said, I'm very fortunate to have a front row ticket to a lot of sort of what's happened in the success of not only Axiata ADS, but also Boost ADA. And if I have to give one example of that sort of proves this question even further, was the partnership that was stoked between Greater Eastern and Boost that was released. Yeah. Congratulations on that as well. That was released, I think about 3 to 4 months ago. Could have been
late June,
Yeah, it feels like a long time ago. But I think, if we're looking for an example of a traditional business that's coming to partner and to move forward with the digital native, I think that's a fantastic point to bring out. So I don't want to go too deep into that, MK, but I'd just sort of like to touch on, given the fact that yourself and your team did lead that partnership, what were some of those key decisions that were put in to ensure not only the success of this partnership, but to ensure that this particular business was the right one for your business to partner with?
Well, so I think, again, I would go back to sort of the mindset, right? And in the conversations and the discussions that we had with the leadership team at Great Eastern, we really did get the sense that they were trying to move to become sort of less traditional, more digital. Yeah. Their mindset was the right one, despite the fact that they were sitting with a lot of legacy assets. And by legacy assets, I mean, if you like, kind of an underwriting process that has, by and large been around for sort of 50 to 100 years. A go-to-market, which is very agent-based, like most insurance companies are. But the willingness and the passion for them to kind of transform themselves to become a lot more digital gave us the confidence to want to partner with them. So if you look at what's happening today, they have teams working alongside us that's co-creating really sort of cool digital-first products, right? Which you'd never imagine a 100-year-old insurance company to be able to do that, right? So it is kind of manifesting itself in the way that they're now working with us.
Fantastic, great, and appreciate a little bit of open transparency on that. And as I said, there's a lot of words and there's a lot of buzzwords we use and sort of questions, but when you put it into real world vector and you actually see the success, it just makes it so much more easy to understand, I guess. So last question, MK. As I said, we could sit here all day, but unfortunately we don't have it all day. Last one. A little bit. How would you answer this one? Is there still a future for traditional business in a digital-first world? A little bit controversial. What's your point?
Actually, it's a lot less controversial than that, because the quick answer is no, there isn't, right? But then again, that's a little bit of a philosophical answer, because look, if we were sitting here 40 years ago, right? Suman talked about the dawn of computing, right? Personal computers, and if you were to sit together having this conversation 40 years ago at the dawn of the personal computers, and you asked me the question whether there's a future for traditional businesses, my answer would have been no too. But that's because any company that doesn't move with the times will soon be breathing the dust from those that have sped in front of them. Again, another cliche, I apologize for that. But look, even something as traditional as, say, manufacturing, right? Taking, I don't know, a product like cars, right? You find that the more progressive auto manufacturers are, Tesla comes to mind, are putting out so much digital automation, not just into the product, but also into their manufacturing processes, that you might imagine a world where those that don't adapt will ultimately die, right? Agriculture, I mean, this is kind of the most the oldest profession. Some would argue there is another one, but this is kind of the oldest profession, where modern farmers are now using connected sensors to tell real time, how they need to irrigate, how they need to fertilize the soil. Are they potentially using drones to figure out whether there's possible pest infestations? All forms of traditional companies. I guess maybe kind of the message here is that if those traditional companies don't evolve, they will die. Right. I know it's a grim note to end with, but that's perhaps a parting message, right? That you do need to evolve. You do need to get with the times to a certain extent. You need to take the word traditional out of the nomenclature, out of the narrative for your business.
Yeah, couldn't agree anymore. Couldn't agree. MK, that's our last question. But I do have, we've got actually the Q&A's blowing up.
Oh, wow.
We've got one more. We've got time probably for one more question that I'd like to pose to you. Interesting question. So industries like telco, finance, travel, entertainment, etc., can use technology to expand their consumer value chain and infrastructure. However, this is not easy for FMCG or CPG. How do these companies rise in technology much more? And is it only communicating to them?
I think yes and no would be my answer. I mean, for me, the no part, I mean, the yes part is pretty obvious, right? But so for me, I think what is important for, FMCGs, and again, you guys are the experts because you guys work a lot with FMCGs. Yeah. We do have some of the FMCG partners in our portfolio, but I think what's important is to recognize where the technology and to a certain extent, perhaps we're talking a little bit about super apps and a little bit of kind of more the consumer engagement end of it, where that's going to actually be able to help you. One is that you are able to potentially reach customers that you may not have been able to reach in your traditional channels via a super app, right? Because super app is probably one of the lowest cost distribution channels for you to consider. But number two, and very quickly and very briefly, number two is really around the data that you are able to harness. So FMCGs have always kind of been challenged to be able to connect to that final end user, right? Because at the end of the day, if you're selling, chocolates, you're selling it via a retailer like, perhaps a Tesco or a Giant here in Malaysia, etc. But it's very hard for you to connect very much to the end user, right? I think there are different models now that allows you to kind of connect, perhaps via an intermediary like an e-commerce or a super app, but actually help you connect. And that's where the power comes in, because once you connect with these new sets of users, once you know kind of tastes, preferences and whatnot, it actually helps reshape the way you do your end-to-end journey, including how you develop products, how you refine products, how you go to market on their products, and how you engage your customers such that they come back and keep buying and buying and buying your products.
Yeah. No,
so I know it's a very brief answer, but whoever asked that question, I'd love to spend time with them because we are doing a lot of cool stuff, not just as ADA, but some of the other companies as well, to really help FMCGs kind of create value from those digital platforms that are out there.
Perfect. Well, MK, short, sweet, to the point, as always, our conversations are. That brings us to an end. Once again, you're an extremely busy man. Thank you very much for spending time with us today on ReCon. I hope the audience got an absolute, as we say in Australia, bucket load of information from this fireside chat. And as I said, MK's doing fantastic work. Him and his team are doing some absolutely groundbreaking work. And as I said, I'm very lucky to have a front row ticket for it and continue to have that front row ticket and to evolve myself. So with that, MK, be safe, be well. Hopefully we can catch up soon in person. Don't know when that will be.
I don't know too.
All right, buddy. Appreciate it, mate. Thank you so much.
Take care, and thank you very much. Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Awesome. That was so much fun. Thanks, MK and AB. Now, guys, thanks so much for listening in and for sending all your questions. We thought it would be a good time for you to do a little bit of work. No worries, it's going to be really easy. I just wanted to take to poll you guys. I will launch this first poll, and all you have to do is tell us. You should see it on your screen now. In 2025, do you think your business will be the incumbent or the challenger? You've got about 30 seconds to take the poll. I'm going to wrap this up in 3, 2, 1. All right, let's see what most of you think. So a big portion of you, 65%, think that your business will be the challenger in 2025. And I think, that just shows how the next 4 years are going to be super exciting with so many new businesses coming to the fore. There's going to be lots of competition, lots of innovation. I can't wait for it.